years have stepped forward in camshafts in the last couple of years, basically, by having the oiler cams. They actually oil each tappet from oil pressure fed. Problems I was having with cams before that was I was burning the tips off of them because they weren't oiling enough. Because it's real hard to spin a motor at 9,200 RPMs without basically having some more oil down there, because none of them are direct oiled. If you were lucky, you still had a tappet that had an oiler hole at the bottom of it, which is oiled by the drain oil off of your rockers down the push rods. So basically, we've stepped forward and put oil pressure fed camshafts in there, and we're using, like the Cooper SEN 40B steel blanks, basically, that are all nitrated and stuff like that, so they're as hard as the original Cooper S crankshafts are nowadays. And then we're using the hard 4130 or EN 40B steel tappets with a DLC coating. It's diamond-like coating on it. It's real hard. Some of the Mercedes stuff, they use that stuff for coatings and stuff in their motors to make them last longer and work better.
Or when you talk about synthetic oils?
Well, what I find is that I can get away with about 2 quarts of synthetic for the other 3 quarts of Valvoline if I want to do that. What I haven't found was, and I was just thinking about this the other day too, was the problem with using the synthetics is the gearbox, not the motor. The motor, as far as I'm concerned, probably would love it. Like any motor, basically, I think the synthetics are probably a leap forward in oil, but the gearbox synchros don't synchronize because it has such a high boundary that they won't, because those are got like little brakes, and you got to gouge into the cones to be able to synchronize the gear ratios so that you don't grind going into them. And what I find is you can get so much synthetic oil in there that they don't dig in. So if you want to get away with some synthetic oil, you can get away with 1 or 2 quarts without making your gearbox grindy. But the first symptom will be when you go to shift your gearbox that it'll crunch going into gear. So you lose a little chunk of the gear or whatever every time you do that.
My car didn't leak oil until someone put synthetic in.
Well, synthetic actually can find a hole almost any place. So yeah, that's true. You'll find more oil leaks with synthetic oils. They made that stuff up for jet motors to begin with, and when they assemble a jet motor or jet engine, they pour the oil into it, and that's the last time they look at it until they take it apart to overhaul it. So that's how good this synthetic oil is. In fact, they say that it actually oils a little better even if it's dirty, for whatever reason. But yeah, it'll find a hole almost anywhere if you got one. I've been playing with that with my race motors, because that's what I use, that red line racing oil. And like I say, I've got away with making an oil-tight motor for racing with that Loctite 518. If you use it right or whatever, you can seal the motor. You actually can seal an English motor up, which is probably pretty outstanding or unordinary. I suppose that I don't know, sometimes you make mistakes with seals, or seals give you trouble or whatever, but that's about the only oil leaks I've been having now.
With the new oils, do you really need for a street car, do you really need an oil cooler anymore, or the oil's that good that you don't need it?
I think it probably depends upon how hard you want to run your motor. if you want to run it real hard and you're in the summertime, it's kind of nice to keep your oil conditioned to a certain extent, even though the oil, if you're using synthetics, will actually stand more heat. I don't know if your motor really does. You know what I mean? So you want to help control the heat, because it only takes a few drops to lubricate something, but it takes a lot of oil to move the heat. And that's what the oil's most responsible for, is moving the heat away from your Babbitt bearings. Otherwise they'd have been gone a long time ago, because they just melt down. So I don't know, like I say, kind of depends on how hard you're going to run it, but other than that, no, probably, although I don't know what you're going to do to run a full synthetic mini motor unless you can take care of the synchro problems. And that's part of why you're running the synthetic in the first place, is the fact that it protects the parts between one and another a hell of a lot better. I had some real experience with what really sold me on synthetic oils. The motor that I'm actually working on right here, over here right now, basically we won the 2004 national championship with it. And Doug Peterson, Mike Kearney's car, the Fortec Mini. Yeah. And we put that, I took the parts and pieces down to Mike's to put together, because he didn't trust me to put my own motor together to put in his car. He wanted to see what I had, basically, and I went back to the runoffs with him in 2003 and 2004. We first used this motor in 2003 for Tuesday morning, which is the first qualifying day at the national runoffs. We blew Joe Huffricker right off the pole. Basically, we had speed at the end of the straightaway and stuff with him and stuff like that. We didn't use it for the final race. Then we used it for the for qualifying and the final race in 2004, basically. And when I pulled the thing back apart again, I found that one of the pistons was tapping the cylinder head. And I'm going, oh my God, I lost a rod bearing. Because that's enough clearance, basically, to let that piston slap the cylinder head. I don't have a lot of clearance on the top. And when I pulled it apart to take a look at the bearing, there was nothing wrong with the bearing or the crankshaft. And what it came out to was that in the set of bearings we got off the shelf, and Mike has found another set like that too off the shelf, that somebody had put the wrong set of bearings in it in sequence, and we just put it in the motor and ran it. So we ran it that way for 2 years basically, running 13 thousandths clearance on the rods, which you should only have about 3. And there wasn't anything wrong with the crank or the bearings. And we were running this thing like 88, 8900 at the end of the chute back there at Mid-Ohio. So I'm going like, well, there's the crank, you can see it, you know what I mean? Still there, the rod's still there, it's apart right now. Never touched the thing. 13 thousandths clearance on the rods. Should have just blew up. Instead it won a national championship. I guess I need to increase the clearance on my rods, right? So yeah, I have a high opinion of synthetic oils. You'll learn them. Most of the parts and pieces in these motors are pretty expensive, and you hate ruin them. You know, like $2,500 for a crankshaft, another $1,000 some odd dollars for a set of rods that you don't like to chew up. So oils, no matter what it is a lot cheaper than motors. And so I think, yeah, anytime I could, I run a synthetic oil in my Ford out there. Basically, I use Mobil 1. I've used Redline oil in it. I probably get twice the miles. I get twice the miles out of oil changes. I'll go 10,000 miles in oil change with it now, and it's still actually looking pretty good. So
What's the right size tool to take it from off to change?
5/16 or 15/16.
15, 16.
Any other questions?